Hi, welcome back to Our Life. You know what time it is. It's time to go on a road trip. I'm very excited for our road trip. I'm sure it's gonna be interesting. Let's just get into it. Even though you were awake, the sun had barely peeked its head above the horizon, and the sky above was still dark, though lightening by the minute. Usually you wouldn't be up so early, especially during summer vacation, but today was different. Today, instead of the lazy days you were used to, everything around you was a flurry of activity as both your family and Cove's prepared for what lay ahead. Oh, we're going with Cove! Because parked in the street, just outside your house, was a massive RV camper so big you couldn't even see Cove's house behind it. That's crazy, because we live in fancy condos. We're rich people. You can't even see the other condo? That's a big RV! His parents had rented the RV for a few days to take him on a short road trip to see the Redwood National Park. You glanced at Cove, who was standing nearby, taking in the scene in front of him. The prospect of the trip had been a mixed bag for him, but it was only 3 days, so it seemed he was dealing with it as best he could, especially now that you and your family were joining them. You weren't sure how exactly it had happened. You knew your parents and Cove spoke to each other often, and somewhere along the way plans were made after Cliff offered to share the space. I totally feel that. I'm, at the time of recording this, about to go on vacation with some family friends, so I know how that feels. You're just planning a vacation and you're like, hey, why don't we all go together? It's great. The parents all thought it was a fantastic idea. You had already gotten a good look inside while helping to load everything in, and you had to admit that while it was a really big car, fitting that many people inside was going to be snug.
Let's go.
Move it or lose it, kiddo. Mom bustled past with a cooler in one hand and a large bottle of water under the other. She was upbeat for this early in the morning. Oh, this makes me so excited to go on my vacation. Ma, however, oh, she looks adorable, seemed to be on the other side of the wavelength. She followed behind her wife, dragging her feet on every step. I'm going to need a whole jug of coffee once we hit the road. I really like getting up early, and I especially love vacations, so I definitely will be as ready to go. I'm an early riser. 6:30 is like my ideal wake-up time, which is so weird, but you know. You stretched your arms out and took in some deep breaths. The air was still a little damp from dew, but you didn't mind it. And then, at the end of the chain, came your sister. She had a bone to pick before the trip officially started. Her rattling off critiques added some level of normalcy to everything new going on. I don't get why I can't sleep in the bed tonight. Jamie is the youngest, and I have never fallen asleep in that loft. We're trying to make things fair for everyone. If you want to play the older card, you should be offering to take the loft both nights. It's important for big siblings to make sacrifices for their younger ones. Elizabeth huffed, not happy with that answer in the slightest, and folded her arms, leaning back against the side of the RV. The trip plans had been nailed down prior, the sleeping arrangements included. Elizabeth still held on to her objections with them. There was a main area of the RV with a couch, loft, and some floor space. At the end of the car was a room with a large bed. Your moms were sharing the bed, Kira was on the couch, and father and son intended to sleep on the floor. The adults determined you and Elizabeth would switch between the small loft above the driver's seat and sharing the bed with moms. I think that's really fine. I mean, yeah, it's sad that couples sleep on the floor, but that's just what you have to do on vacation, so. As long as you had a place to rest your head of some description, it didn't bother you. Alright, you lot, does everyone have everything they need? We're heading out in 5 minutes. Now's the time to double check. You don't want to forget something important. At that word, Elizabeth yelped and dashed back into the house, her bedhead hair bouncing behind her as she went. Ma came over and gave you a smile, settling her hands on her hips. How about you, Jamie? Do you have all your clothes packed? Toiletries, deodorant, floss, anything else you can think of? I'll just think about it. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't remember what. It's the anxiety, man. Ma chuckled and gave you a squeeze on the shoulder. I get like that on trips too, so I've learned to pack extra in case I or anyone else forgets. With the amount of supplies we've stuffed into the RV, I think we'll be okay. It's only a few days after all. Thanks, Ma. With a few minutes left to spare before leaving, you mentally went over what you had packed for the trip. Clothes, a pillow and blanket, usual day-to-day gear for most people. You also had more personal things, such as... I always bring a gaming console, always. The drive to the National Redwood Park would take an entire day one way, so you wanted to make sure you had a way to entertain yourself while traveling there and back. Is there a book option? Okay, well, definitely an MP3 player. With so much time going to be spent driving in a car, you wanted to make sure you'd be able to have some music to put on. Things to read? You'd packed one of your old favorites, a new one you'd never tried before. You knew you'd have plenty of time for both of them on such a long drive. And that's pretty much it. Hey, let me take that for you, Jamie. I'll stow it in the RV. There's a few spots left, it'll fit. You let Kira take your bag and gave her a grateful smile. With nothing left to do, you watched the others getting ready for the trip. Kira and Cliff seemed to have the most energy of anyone. They were finishing packing the suitcases away while your moms had gone to lock up the house. They high-fived whenever another one got crammed into the storage compartments of the vehicle. Even though your own parents were more low-key than Co's, you could tell they were both excited for the trip. It had been a while since your family had been away anywhere together. Elizabeth skipped towards the RV, a bag slung over her shoulder, and you were surprised to see how she seemed more optimistic about the whole ordeal now. Usually she wasn't one to exit the confines of her room unless it was for TV or food or to leave her family behind to be with friends. You would have thought 3 whole days packed in an RV with 6 others would be too much for her, but it was a nice surprise. You supposed any vacation was better than no vacation in her mind. That's how I feel. Cove had been pretty quiet so far and more than anything seemed to be overwhelmed by the situation. I'm excited. It was great to get away and explore new places. Soon the miscellaneous remaining tasks had all been wrapped up. Everyone piled into the RV. It was officially time for the trip to start. And it did. Cliff took the first shift driving. He cautiously navigated the massive car out of the narrow neighborhood streets. It was touch and go for the first part of the journey. Your moms and Kira were all huddled at the front, trying to get a view of how much space they had on each side. There was a sense of relief when the first long leg of the trip was hit, and the RV would only need to go down one stretch of highway for miles. The mom group cleared out of the driver's area, leaving Cove's dad to it, taking more comfortable seats around the main cabin. You felt like you could finally relax now, too. Time slipped by as the morning faded away. Before you realized it, the engine of the RV came to a stop, but only halted for a few moments as Cliff climbed out of the driver's seat and Mom took over. Ma was sitting shotgun, giving Mom a quick tutorial on the controls, as it was her first time driving anything this large. Cliff groaned as he headed towards the rest of you, stretching his arms above his head and loosening up his muscles. We're making good progress. Nice sunglasses, man. I'm a sucker for sunglasses. I have like 15,000 pairs. Yeah, maybe you should take a nap in the back for a while. That was a long haul you just did, and I know you're on less sleep than usual. Cliff waved a hand, the trademark grin of his slipping into place. I don't need sleep. Still got a few miles in the old tank. He flexed an arm, showing off his muscles to drive the point about how resilient he was home, and Kira rolled her eyes in amusement. Dad, everybody has to sleep. Cove shook his head at the tough guy act, though Cliff simply chuckled and ruffled his son's hair. So, are you going to be driving again anytime soon, Mr. Holden? I want to know so I can prepare. Did anyone pack some rope? I might need it. There are no seatbelts up here. Elizabeth called down from where she was lounging in the loft above the driving compartment. She was laying on her back, her hair falling over the side and swinging around as the RV started up again and took off down the road. A bag of potato chips was balanced on Elizabeth's stomach, and she tossed a couple in her mouth right as Cliff held a hand to his chest, pretending to be offended by their remark. Kira laughed lightheartedly. Lucky for all of us, we have enough adults to cover the shifts today. You won't be driving again until tomorrow. Just enough time to write up my last will and testament. Not you two. The rest of the group laughed while Cliff pouted, and you gave him an apologetic shrug. Mom then shouted back in her seat to join in on the conversation, a playful smile tilting her lips. What I'm more worried about is this old monster getting us there and back again before falling apart. It looks as though it was built in the early 90s. It must be older than some of the occupants. That's just the aesthetic of the decor. It's not that old, I think. Did you ask what year the model was before you rented it? Kira wrinkled her nose and thought, Yes, I did. I just can't remember what the answer was. Cliff chuckled at her, while the rest of you let out a collective sigh. The RV lurched a little as it picked up speed, and you held onto the ladder to the loft to keep your balance. You felt something graze the top of your head before a weight settled on your brown hair. When you tilted your chin up carefully to look, you heard the rustling of the bag of chips, and realized Elizabeth had rested the end of it on your head. She gestured to the opening, silently offering to share her snack. Yeah, that's nice. What's chips? What flavor are they, though? Because I hate barbecue, and I hate plain Lay's. Reaching up, you scooped up some chips, after the weight of the packet left your scalp. You happily munched away as the conversation continued on, and you got closer and closer to your destination. The day flew by, with the group of you chatting, playing games, and passing the time together, before finally arriving at the park and setting up for the night. Ma was closing the windows while everyone got ready for bed, saying goodnight to the others as she made her way to the back room. You had all had dinner together while still driving, and some hours after you had arrived at your destination and found a spot to park in the forest. For the rest of your stay. I can't read. Giving a look across the front of the RV, you noticed almost everyone there was already dozing off where they were. with Cove having completely fallen asleep curled up in the passenger seat. He must have done so while Kira was driving the last leg, and they had decided not to disturb him. Kira herself was the only one there who was still awake, flipping through a magazine next to a portable light from her spot on the couch. It seemed Mr. Holden needed to sleep despite his claims. You followed your moms into the back room and closed the door behind you before crawling onto the bed with them. It was a queen-size bed, so there was enough space for the three of you together without too much squishing.
Good night.
Get a good rest, Jamie. We've got a big day ahead of us tomorrow.
That's fantastic.
I'm looking forward to the bushwalk in the morning. It's been a long time since I was out in nature like this. There'll be plenty for us to see. You stayed awake for a little while longer while your moms whispered about the park and forest in general, with the sound of their voices in the background. Eventually, you nodded off to sleep. Aw, I love the sky. It's beautiful. The next morning, you were up bright and early, preparing for the day ahead. You can't really sleep wonderful in a bed with two other people. It was nothing compared to your bed at home, but at least you didn't have to sleep on the floor, so you couldn't complain too much. Ma whined a bit about the firmness of the mattress, but Mom had only encouraged her to enjoy the trip while she could. While looking for a spot to get ready, you had some trouble finding a space of your own, as the others were doing the same thing. Cove was perched on top of the counter, brushing his hair and tucking up his legs every time someone wanted to move fast. Your parents were checking, double-checking, and triple-checking that you had everything, to the point where you'd stop listening to them altogether. You knew you wouldn't be returning to the RV at all that day, but by the look of the backpacks they were packed up and ready to go, you doubted anything was missing from them. It didn't take much longer until you all exited the RV in a bustle and headed into the Redwood National Park. Wow. Cove had his head tilted upwards towards the canopy of trees, his eyes wide as he took in the massive trunks on either side of you. You knew that the redwood trees here were considered the tallest trees on Earth, but you weren't prepared for exactly how huge they would be in person.
Come on.
Smile, you two! You spun just in time for Kira to snap a picture of you and Cove together before she pointed her camera at Cliff, trying to get a shot despite his weak protest that she should just enjoy the moment. Your parents were walking behind the group a little, with Mom telling Ma some information she had read about the park in a brochure. Ma listened happily while looking around and taking in the sights, every now and then asking a question or making a joke about something Mom had said. You smiled at them, thinking your mom must have read a lot of pamphlets to know so much about the park. Maybe you should come and work here as a tour guide if you know so much about the place. Elizabeth teased, earning a squeeze on the nose from your mom. She seemed to be enjoying herself, but you thought that might just be because she was amused by everyone else's reactions. I love being outside, especially in the forest, so I'm in a good mood. The air was fresh and clean, and it was nice to be outdoors with the people you loved most. You were certain that this was only the beginning of what would be a great day. The adults had decided on some casual nature walks rather than any serious hiking, and you strolled along at your own pace, taking in the scenery. Elizabeth sped up a little, smirking at Cove as she fell into place between the two of you, and immediately you could tell by her expression she was going to say something taunting. I can't believe our families are actually on vacation together. She threw her arms out, speaking with a genuine sense of bewilderment. I would have joked about something like this happening, but now I'm not sure I want to give them any more ideas. Cove smiled at her, even if it was a little awkwardly, and continued walking along. Just watch, next year they'll be talking about their new, amazing idea. She put on a fake voice deeper than her own. We should just sell both our houses and move in together. Think of how much we'd save on the mortgage. It was clear that Elizabeth was being sarcastic. Cove simply shook his head, not really bothered by her. You supposed he was used to this at this point. But seriously, they really do act like we're a single family just because we live across the street from each other. That's how friendship works sometimes. You're just one big happy family. Elizabeth gave you and Cove a look, her eyes glinting with mischief as she leered at you. Maybe one day we will be related. Legally, anyway. She said it as though she was a gossipy old lady. But she almost immediately dropped the tone and nonchalantly said her real thoughts. At least that's what Ma thinks. Cove still blushed, which made Elizabeth smile triumphantly, as though that was her whole purpose for teasing him. Then he mumbled quietly, refusing to make eye contact with either of you. I don't know why you think you're so funny when no one else does. Ooh. Ooh. Should I say it? I'm gonna say it. It's a game. I would never say this in real life, but I'm gonna say it because it's a game. I'll marry you, Cove. He looks at you in disbelief. He genuinely could not believe this is where the conversation had gone. I expect you to give me an answer sooner or later. Cove frowned and reddened harder, but pretended to ignore what you were saying. His sister noticed what was happening. Oh, he isn't going to engage with this topic. He groaned at the continued teasing and increased the speed of his walk. The day continued on with plenty to see and experience. You passed a few different activities that you would have liked to try out if you had time, such as kayaking and rock climbing, but Ma said that you would have to wait for another trip. There was a little stream during the walk that you sat beside and set out a picnic for lunch, nibbling on a selection of fruit, sandwiches, and chips. Various birds flew by overhead, and you made a game out of guessing the species they were hanging out in the trees nearby. You even managed to get a couple of them right, including the kingfisher that grabbed half of Cliff's sandwich. I'm glad I got to do this. It's definitely a special experience, and one you'd remember for a long time to come. You smiled to yourself, committing the sights and sounds to memory. Your group made it back to camp just as the sun was setting in the sky and the stars were appearing one by one. Everyone had enjoyed different parts of it most. You traded stories of what you thought while you were eating dinner, and afterwards you pitched in to help clean up. You, along with Elizabeth and Cove, got to head back to the RV early and spend some time together while the parents stayed outside longer. It was nice to have the space to yourselves after the cramped journey there, and while Elizabeth had locked herself in the back room with her headphones, you and Cove were left to the main lounge area. I'm gonna hang out with Cove, obviously. Well, let's take a load off. We've got some time. You took a seat on the sofa while Cove sat down on the other end, tapping his fingers against his knees. Your cheeks warmed a little at that. Being close to him never failed to feel exciting. You'd seen Cove nearly every day for the past 5 years, but seeing him in a jacket was still somewhat unusual. In Southern California, he could get away with that. It was a simple difference from his normal style, yet you couldn't help noticing the way he looked right now. It looked great on him. Thank you, I picked it out myself. In fact, Cove always looked nice. When Cove cleared his throat, your eyes snapped at his. He had an eyebrow raised, and it clearly caught you staring at him.
What?
Is everything okay? Yeah, everything is really good. You smiled, knowing to yourself about why you felt that way while Cove watched in confusion. You decided to explain a part of it. You know, I hardly ever see you wearing a jacket, especially in summer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like wearing as few layers as possible. It's easier that way. I'd rather be cold than extra hot, and it's kind of a pain to carry extra clothes around. My parents made me bring this jacket. I love wearing layers. There's something about a lot of layers that makes me feel all snug and comfortable. Cove smiled lightly and you nodded. I've noticed. You perked up at hearing that. He noticed you too? Aw. Okay, sure, let's talk about what you like to see others wear. So what type of clothes or accessories do you like to see on somebody other than you? Cove's eyes widened at the question, and his defensive reply seemed to slip out before he had a chance to have a proper think about it. Nothing? A snort of laughter escaped you, and even though Cove's face flushed red, you could see the hint of a smile on his lips too. Come on, that's not what I meant. You composed yourself and sat up straighter, all traces of laughter disappearing from your face. Answer with what you mean then. Isn't there anything at all you think looks good when you see it on someone? Cove mumbled under his breath and you couldn't quite catch the words. He was having a difficult time with the subject. I swear I won't make fun of you. That's not really it. Cove seemed pretty grumpy about your statement, but you weren't ready to give up so easily. Please? Cove sighed and looked down at his lap where he was fidgeting with his hands, still reluctant to give an answer. I don't know. You made an unimpressed sound over how this was going. Are you sure? Fine, I guess I kind of like ankle bracelets. Ankle bracelets? Yeah, everyone can wear a pretty bracelet. Wrist ones are cool too, but they're pretty normal. There's something fun or flirty about ankle bracelets. It's more special or something. I don't know how to explain it. Cove brushed his knuckles against his cheek awkwardly, seemingly unsure where to go from here. I like them too. Cove smiled at you, happy to hear he wasn't the only one who felt that way. I actually have ankle bracelets in real life. I don't wear them all the time because if I do, I forget to take them off in my sleep and then they like make patterns on my legs and I don't like that, but I do have them. When he said nothing else, you took a moment to gather your own thoughts. You had to get an anklet on ASAP. Yeah, I'm gonna say that. You needed to see how Cove would react to that. Cove looked away again, feeling awkward about this. You gave him an understanding look, and usually he would start to smile like normal again, but not this time. His expression only stiffened more. You were surprised to see him like this, as he always bounced back pretty quickly after being flustered. Cove? Still, he wouldn't look at you. Now even his breathing was growing tense. It began to click. He was trying to build himself up enough to say something hard for him. You waited for it silently. Until finally, he peeked your way through the corner of his eyes. You were fully attentive by this point for whatever he was going to mention next. People having green eyes, that's also something I like. I have green eyes. Cove, what are you saying? Huh? For a moment you were stunned, and at a complete loss for words. It was definitely not what you imagined this was going. Cove faced you head on, his expression full of desperate meaning. You got the distinct impression he hadn't chosen that just because he liked the color green. He chose it entirely because it was your eye color. Was he trying to flirt with you? That was all you could think. Your legs felt like jelly and you wondered if you might fall right off the couch. What do you like for another person, Jamie? Everything about you? Aw. Blue eyes. Cope blushed a deeper shade of red and his mouth fell open, acknowledging that you had used the same line back on him. Now you were both flirting with each other. Aw. He placed his hands in his lap and looked down. It seemed he hadn't expected to get this far and didn't know where to go from there. With the topic abruptly dropped off, Cope officially had no more to say on it. The parents all arrived soon after, each of them climbing into the RV and finding some place to sit down and rest their legs. Elizabeth, having heard the commotion, came out of the room for the first time since arriving and joined you all. You spent the evening chatting and playing games, enjoying the last evening of the trip together. Bedtime arrived within the blink of an eye. As the group hunkered down for the night, your mom did a final round to be sure nothing had been left behind. She explained that Cliff was going to start driving early in the morning, like on the first day, but would be letting everyone else in the group sleep. There wouldn't be a need for all of them to get up. Now was the time to check you hadn't left anything outside. You, as well as everyone, were confident you had it all packed up inside the RV, which meant it was time to get some rest before the journey home tomorrow. Your moms and Elizabeth said goodnight, heading to the back room, while you climbed up to the loft. Cove and his family got situated below in the previously set arrangement. You tried to get comfortable as a million thoughts were running through your mind. It was hard to believe that the trip was practically over, and before you knew it, you'd be back in your own bed at home. I enjoyed it. It was short, that was for sure, but you got to see and do so much during your time here. All in all, it was a nice break away from home. The minutes ticked by silently. It didn't take long for the soft snores of Cliff and Kira to drift up to you. They were asleep now. You wondered if Cove was still awake and decided to poke your head out from the loft to find out. You blinked through the dark. Looking down the hall, you noticed Cove laying on his back, his eyes staring straight up at the ceiling. His seafoam hair was spread out on his sleeping bag. He must have felt you watching him because suddenly his eyes locked onto yours. It was difficult to see much through the dim light, but you could make out the crooked smile on his face well enough. I'll wave at him. Cove waved back, still smiling at you through the dim light. Ooh, come up here! Cove looked unsure about it, but you were happy to see him slowly start to sit up anyway. His sleeping bag rustled as he moved, though he tried to go slow, and frozen up like a deer in headlights every time he made a sound, watching his parents for any sign of movement. Eventually he managed to maneuver around the sleeping bag and make it to the ladder, standing on the bottom rung where he looked up at you and whispered, "What?" Invite him up. Do you want to come up? His eyes widened just so. You could only tell because he had come to where you were. Cove glanced behind him quickly as the sleeping parents before turning to you. Okay. You broke out into a grin and scooched back as far as you could, making space for Cove to crawl in. He was very tall, so it wasn't a great fit for him, but he managed to squeeze himself in. You understood how that felt, and with the two of you in the loft together, there was barely any room to move. Aww. You laid down next to each other on your sides, face to face. He got under the blanket a bit. One of his arms was nestled under his head for comfort. The other had nowhere to go and was rested alongside his chest on the floor of the loft. Cove spoke to you softly. So, what am I doing here? I don't know. Why are you here? Cove raised an eyebrow, giving you a disbelieving look, and you shrugged as much as the space would allow. I'm not sure about this. Cove swallowed loudly, and you noticed he wouldn't look you in the eyes anymore. I'd be nervous too. The two of you had gotten really close over the years, but this was a different kind of closeness. You couldn't fully explain how you were feeling, but you wanted to continue getting closer to Cove, because we like him. You thought back to earlier in the evening, when you and Cove had been talking alone on the sofa. He had definitely been flirting then, and now you were here. I'm gonna try and talk to him. So, it's been a really nice night, huh? Oh, yeah, I guess it has. Don't you think the loft is more comfortable than it looks? It's not bad. It would be nice to have more room. Cove smiled at you through the dim light, and you knew he was only joking. The two of you continued to whisper for a while, becoming more relaxed. Oh, whoa! Maybe just a little. You closed the distance completely and nuzzled your face into the top of his head. His hair was soft. Am I taller than him? Wait, what? How does that... Okay, maybe we're just... I can't visualize this in my head. I'll believe you. Cove stiffened up and let out a yelp, which he quickly bit down on his lip to stifle. He gave you an apologetic look. This still wasn't bad for him, just surprising. After a few more moments, he settled in, his breaths deep and steady. He moved his head into the crook of your neck. Oh, so I guess we're positioned above him. You could feel his lips curved into a smile, and it made you happier to know he was enjoying this moment too. Oh, the two of you fell asleep before long, cuddled up together. That's a bad idea. Everyone's gonna see us now. When you woke up the next morning, it was to the rumble of the RV as it traveled the long journey home. You noticed quickly that you weren't as warm as you had been during the night, and when you checked next to you, Cove was gone. Blinking sleepily, you peeked over the edge of the loft to find where he had gone. Maybe he had snuck back to his spot on the floor during the night? However, you soon noticed him sitting on the couch talking quietly with his mom. His head hung in embarrassment. Oh no! Your movement gave you away, and Curia suddenly looked up and caught your eye. She simply smiled amusedly at you, and it was obvious what had happened. Cove hadn't gotten away with it. They found him there in the loft, and then you woke up while he was trying to explain. You knew it was going to be a long, long time before you lived this one down, if you ever did. Soon, your moms and Elizabeth emerged from their room, dressed and ready for the day of travel. You spent most of the day hanging out together in the RV, savoring the last few hours of vacation. Kira suggested a few different travel games she used to play with Cove when he was younger, and you all had a great time competing against each other. A little later in the day, you tried to talk to Cove about what happened in the loft, but he simply apologized and changed the subject. It was a bit too much for him to try speaking on, especially right now. You understood. When the RV finally pulled onto your street, it was well into the night, and you were looking forward to crawling into your own bed after the last few days away. Why did I pause before saying away? Sorry. Everyone else must have been feeling the same because it was mutually agreed that unpacking and cleaning the RV would wait until morning. Once home again, you went straight up to your room and dropped onto your bed, shoes and all. Oh, I kind of missed Cove. The two of you had been basically living together for 3 days. It was nice. But you knew that it wouldn't be the last time the two of you would spend time together, and that thought comforted you. With those last few thoughts drifting through your mind, it wasn't long before you dozed off to sleep. Tomorrow, life would go back on like normal. That was so fun! Oh my gosh, that was so much longer than I expected. But that was so cute! Oh my gosh! Okay, so next episode we will do And Then Summer Ended. And we will move on to, I think it's the final section. Aren't there just 3 sections? That kind of is crazy because it's taken so long for me to finish this series, so it's a happy and sad feeling that we're almost done. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a good day, good week, good year, good life. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye!